Hello everyone and welcome to my first Friday Reads video. Now I normally only write my impressions of the books I've read on my book blog, which is called Average Gal Reads, and I'll put that link down in the show notes if you'd like to see full reviews. I'll put that down in the video description if you'd like to read my full reviews that I normally write. But I thought I'd try doing weekly videos also to just give little thoughts on what I've read that week. I'm hoping that it'll keep me honest because I see myself falling behind on my reading. I want to read more often. I have a goal of posting 3 reviews a week to my blog, but I've sort of fallen behind on that, mainly because when I was working an outside job, I tended to read a lot to relieve my stress. And quite frankly, now that I'm at home, even though I am stressed a bit about not having a job, I don't have that work stress that propels me to pick up a book. I know that's weird, but so I want to get back on track with my reading. So I thought maybe doing a video would help me the same way that doing videos about my knitting and crochet have helped me pick up more projects. So I'm normally I'll talk about just what I've read that week, but since this is my first video, I thought I'd talk about what I read this month since this is basically the end of May. So I'm looking at my list. The first book that I read this month was Sex Appeal by Lori Foster. It is a Harlequin, what you'd call a Harlequin category romance. It's under their Harlequin Blaze label, which I think they're changing the name of that to something else, Harlequin Heat or Sizzle or something. I don't normally read Harlequins. I read a lot of romances, but I don't normally read Harlequins. I'm I hate to say it, but I I read Harlequins as a teenager. I picked up one or two as a teenager back in the 80s, and I still have kind of that bad impression in my mind about Harlequin romances. So I don't intentionally pick up a Harlequin romance. I have picked up a couple love inspired, not realizing it was Harlequin. Um, but then as soon as I read them, I realized, yeah, it's kind of a category romance. A lot of category romances for me, anyway, they they finish too quickly, and there isn't as much conflict as I would like. So I generally don't read them. I know that there are exceptions, because this book, Sex Appeal, it it had a little bit more to it. I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, but compared to other Harlequins I've read, I would give it 3 out of 5 stars. I'd give it an extra star just because there was a little bit more to it than other Harlequins I've read. The witty banter between the hero and heroine was fun to read. There were a couple things in it that I felt like they could have, if they just sat and talked to each other, they'd been done. But I borrowed that from the library. I'm not sure why it was on my wish list, but it is. I'm trying to get through my not get through because realistically I'll always be adding books to my Goodreads to be read shelf and my library wish list, but I'm trying to start reading the books I'm adding to my lists instead of just constantly looking for new books, just like some people who buy books and have the actual physical books in their house try to go ahead and read the books they've already bought instead of buying more books. This is kind of the digital version of that. I'm trying to read the free books I've downloaded onto my iPad and my Kindle app and that sort of thing. So this one was added a while back. I don't know why, but I read it. It was a quick read. If you were stuck somewhere and this was on the shelf at, the cabin in the woods or the library of the cruise ship, you wouldn't be upset that you found it because it's a nice quick read. The next book I read was Hooked on Murder by Betty Hechtman. And I know I added this to my library wish list because I got caught up in this idea that I should read more cozies, trying to get out of my my comfort zone, or what some people would call a rut, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I thought I'd try to read different books, and so I tried. I decided to try reading a cozy again. I've read cozies before, and I thought I'd give them another try because so many people like them. So many people in my age group, women of a certain age, like them because there's a murder, but it's not too bloody, not too scary, that sort of thing. And I gave this one is the first book in a series called The Crochet Murders, or Crochet something. But all of these cozies have either a bookstore or a bakery or something in them. And I gave it 2 out of 5 stars, mainly because it was the writing was fine. Mainly because I was more interested in what the crochet group in the book was doing than the murder mystery. I didn't really care who did it, and I honestly felt cringy and uncomfortable when the main character would sneak around bushes trying to get information and stuff like that. It was just uncomfortable for me. So I I know I'm a little squeamish person when it comes to that kind of stuff. So but I've decided after reading this book that I think I like cozies that are set in historical settings. Because as far as books are concerned, I think, the first 10 books of Reese Bowen's Her Royal Spyness series, which was set, I believe, in the 1930s. And as far as TV, I don't particularly care for those contemporary ones like the garage sale mysteries or whatever they're called on um, Hallmark Movies and Mysteries. But I I loved Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries. I watched all of those twice through. So I think I like, and those are set in the 1920s. So I think I just like more of a historical setting. I think a cozy is more believable for me in a historical setting. The third book was nonfiction. It was actually a cookbook called The Homemade Pantry by Alana Chernilla, I believe her name is. And this I borrowed from my library. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I liked the I liked the anecdotes in between the it is one of those cookbooks that has anecdotes between each recipe or preceding each recipe, and little family stories about how her family likes that recipe or that food or whatever, why she started cooking it or whatever. And I enjoyed those, but I did the recipes. There was nothing in the recipes that appealed to me. I'm sure that they were very good recipes. I know I put this book on my list because it was one of those books that um, purport to teach you how to make things yourself instead of buying like different processed foods. And there was another book that I really enjoyed I believe it was called Make the Bread and Buy the Butter. And there were several recipes in there that I really wanted to try. So this was I thought another book in that vein, but there just wasn't anything in it that I felt like I wanted to try. The next book I read, now this book is totally this is when I was saying that I'm in a comfort zone, or what some would call a rut with my reading, is because of books like these. It's called Seven Brides for Seven Mail Order Husbands. It's a novella collection published by Barber Publishing. I received this as a digital advanced reader's copy through NetGalley, and I believe it's expected to be published June 2nd. Um, I've read these novella collections. I've read at least 25 of these because when I am under stress, for some reason, these inspirational romances, inspirational meaning Christian, these inspirational romances that are set after the Civil War, but before the 1920s, so that period, and set usually in the American on the American prairie, so people are on farms or building up a town, living in a small town, building up a town, that sort of thing. I just I just like those. I like those better than the Regencies. I feel like the Regency women have nothing to do all day, whereas the the women on the farm, they're always having to milk the cow or cook dinner or tend to the baby or bring the laundry in. There's always descriptions of something, that some sort of chore they're doing to keep the farm going. And so there's more chance for them to be proficient at something, where the Regency ladies seem to just sit around. But anyway, this particular novella collection is um, the novellas are tied together with with a premise. Most novella collections have a loose theme, like everybody in it is a mail order bride, or every story is set in Texas, or the every bride is British, or something like that. But this one is the other variety, where there is a premise set up at the beginning, and each author has to write their story set in that town or that premise. And for this book, it's 2 years after the Civil War, and the town of Turtle Springs has lost almost all their men. I mean, you still have a few of the old men, and you have some of the young boys who are still, school age, but all the men in between went off to war and died. So the women are trying to run things, but they're having trouble keeping things going because they need the extra manpower that left town with the men. So they put their money together and put ads in papers across the country to say that they're having a husband audition on this certain day in May, where they will do kind of like a prairie version of speed dating, and the women each get to pick who they feel like they want to court. Not that they're necessarily going to be like an immediate shotgun wedding, but just who they're going to court. So it draws manpower to the town, even if the people don't end up getting married. Um, I've discovered a lot of authors that I like from these collections. Mary Connealy is an example that stands out to me, but this one was not quite up to the standard of the collections. I've read collections where every single story in it was stellar. Um, my main my main criteria for a novella collection, or a novella in general, is can you can you manage to give me a full story within that length, that shortened length of a novella, that shortened word count. And there were two stories in this collection that did that for me. And the other five were okay, but they weren't great, but they were necessary because they fleshed out the life of the town for the other two stories. So it, I mean, the other two stories I think could have stood alone without the other five stories, but the other five stories helped to just flesh out what the town was about, flesh out the world of the town. I still think it would be worth reading. It certainly would be a great book to pass on to your grandmother or somebody when you're done. And I gave that 3 out of 5 stars. My last book was also an advanced reader's copy that I got through Penguin House's first to read program. It's called The Little French Bistro by Nina George, and the expected publication date is June 12th. Um, I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars. It it was more melancholy than I expected it to be. It's about a woman who is trying to discover herself, who's been married for 40 years, but not necessarily happy during that time, and she runs off to try to discover herself. And I expected something maybe along the lines of Debbie Macomber, even though Debbie Macomber is not exactly my favorite author, but she does kind of publish these sort of light women's fiction, ensemble cast type books. And this had the ensemble cast. It had, but it was more like literary fiction. It had attempts at magical realism that didn't feel fully fleshed out for me. Um, and the blurb described it as uplifting, but I felt like it was sad and melancholy. So that's why I gave it. It was well written though, but it was sad. So I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. The book that I abandoned this month was Persuasion. I'm trying to get better at abandoning books because I tend to hang on to a book and hang on to a book and try to, like, I won't start another book because I still have this book going, but I won't pick this book up because I'm not enjoying it. And so I waste all my reading time avoiding a book. So I'm trying to get better at just saying, hey, I'm not enjoying this right now. Let me put this down. And this time it was Persuasion by Jane Austen. I think the language was too twisty for me while reading it, and I think I would understand it better on audiobook. So I may try it on audiobook. And I was reading that through the Serial Reader app, which gives you like a 10 to 20 minute chunk of a book, a classic book each day, so that you can try to space out reading a classic during your free time. It's a cool app. I just am not good at making myself read little bits of tough books. My goal, I wanted to also mention my Goodreads goal. My Goodreads goal for this year is 23 books. Excuse me, is 50 books this year. I've read 23 books so far, which puts me 4 books ahead of schedule. Puts me closer to finishing 50 books before the end of the year. I guess that's what they mean by 4 books ahead of schedule. Currently, what I am going to be reading this weekend and into next week, I have another advanced reader's copy. This time it is a graphic novel. I got it through NetGalley as well, so it's a digital, so I'm reading it on my iPad. It's a graphic novel version of The Good Earth, which I remember reading in high school. And the only memory I have of this book is a vague memory of a woman giving birth to a baby in a rice paddy. Now, that could be wrong. I could be mixing that up with something else, but that is the only memory I have of that book. So I'm looking forward. I've already read the first maybe 5 pages of it, and I enjoyed it. So I think that this should go quickly. Um, After that, I also have some. I generally read digital books, but I do have several. I say about five, five physical books. Uh, um, 4 of them are graphic novels. So no, three, four. Yeah, 3 or 4 graphic novels at least sitting over there that I have not read, that I keep meaning to read, that have been there for almost a year at this point. That were assigned to my daughter for a class that she was taking, and so she brought them home to me to read. and I still haven't gotten to them. So hopefully I'll get to those next week and just make it a whole graphic novel week. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. If you'd like to read my full reviews of the books that I talked about this week or any other books that I've read this year, you can go to my blog, as I said, Average Gal Reads, which I will put in the show notes. But thank you for listening, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Bye.